Hi, I'm Casey Frashante, professional astrologer. Today, I've got kind of a beast of a video for you. We're going to look at what happened really, astrologically, between Kim Kardashian and Kris Humphries. I don't know when the last time any of you thought about this was. It's something that I think about quite often. I was a teenager when this happened, and it was a very monumental event in my sphere at that time. Most teenagers are like obsessed with celebrity culture in some way. Anyways, Kim Kardashian got married to Kris Humphries, who is a basketball player, in 2011. I was about 13 years old at the time, and this was a big deal because it was Kim Kardashian, she was getting married, but also she ended up filing for divorce from him about 3 months after their wedding. And that was like this whole thing. It doesn't sound like that dramatic now, but at the time, because I guess with like social media and stuff, you can expect weird things like this to happen. But back then, it was not like weird, but it was like it was a moment. Okay, it was a moment. And everyone was saying like, "Oh, like was this a publicity stunt?" And again, like I remember it so clearly. Like every magazine cover, it was with Kim Kardashian and this wedding that was coming up, and then it lasted like a year. This wedding coming up, and then it was all about the divorce. Like she was in like the news headlines constantly around this time, and everyone was saying, was it for like publicity? Did they actually love each other? That's where like the Kim crying meme comes from. The ugly crying meme. It's her like talking about how she really loved him and she feels terrible that she had to like, break up with him, ruined his life basically. So I want to look at what happened between them, if it was all for publicity, what I think astrologically was actually going on. And I also, okay, so we need to look at Kim's natal chart and her ability to relate, the relationship potential in her chart, and then we'll do the same for Kris. Then I'll look at the synastry between them, which is their chart overlays and how their planets interact with each other, understand how they relate to each other, and what their feelings were. And this is why I say it's kind of like a beast of a video, because normally I'd end it there. But we're also going to look at Kim's predictive cycles for that time, and then I'll give you my unbiased opinion on what was happening between them. I also need a preface. Even without the astrology stuff, we need to, I should disclose. And this is something I don't remember ever being talked about at the time, but they got married before they had even known each other for a year, or like I don't know when they met. They started dating in October of 2010. They were married by August in 2011. So what they weren't even together for a year. They got engaged in May 2011. From the engagement to the marriage, I don't know the specific date, but it was May to I think they got married on the 20th of August or the 10th of August. Let me check. Um, I've got like a million notes. Okay, wait. They got married on the 20th of August. Sometime in May to the 20th of August, that's three-ish months, maybe even less than 3 months, to plan this wedding. And this was a big wedding. I can't remember how much it cost them, but it was televised on their reality show. They had like a wedding special. Every press outlet in the United States, probably even Europe and Australia, etc. They were there. Like this was it was a big moment. It was like I remember actually people correlating it to uh equal social impact, cultural impact to the royal wedding, which I think also happened in 2011 or 2012. I think it was 2011. So it was like we had the royal wedding, and if you're Australian, like that's a big deal. It's Australian, British, Canadian, whatever. The royal wedding, and then we had this wedding as well, and they were correlated. So I wonder if there was some kind of competition going on between like the Kardashians and the royal family. Anyways, so it was a really big public spectacle, probably a very expensive wedding. I'm sure it was published how much it costs. I can't remember. I didn't take notes. Something like that to then file for divorce 3 months later. They'd only known each other or been going out for less than a year at that point when they got married. Kim filed for a divorce a year after they started going out. Also, I think it's important to mention or disclose Kim was 5 years older than this guy. I think Kim was 31 or was about to turn 31 when she got married. This guy was 26. I know I'm not big on being like, oh, like an age gap relationship because I don't think of this as an age gap. But when you think of, and I know this isn't politically correct, but women typically mature faster than men, physically and mentally and emotionally. So for an older woman, again, it's 5 years between them, not that big of a deal. But for an older woman in her 30s to be in a marriage or agree to a marriage to a younger man, again, 5 years, not that big of a deal, but because it's a woman, the older woman, I feel like she would have been more savvy to things and she was more famous. There was a big power imbalance, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say. There was some kind of power imbalance between them. Kim had more money. She was generally more successful. He was a basketball player. But I didn't know anything about him until this engagement and marriage. It's not like he was this huge basketball superstar, but there was some kind of power imbalance, social imbalance. Kim was older, like more mature, probably like more she knew more about being famous. Oh my gosh, she had been married before in the past as well. This was her second marriage. This is this guy's first. So I just wanted to get that out the way as well. We're not even into the astrology yet, and like there's something going on. Okay. And because I'm saying this because I think it's relevant later. Anyways, okay, let's get into the astrology. We'll look at Kim's chart and her ability to relate. Not a whole like personality analysis going on, but just like relationship analysis. Okay. Kim has got Venus in Virgo, and I'm talking about Venus because Venus is love and relationships for everybody. Venus is in its fall position. I think Kim has the ability to be controlling, nitpicky, has it some kind of like critical approach to others, but she thinks that she's helping. It's not malicious. It's just she thinks she's doing them a favor by being controlling and nitpicky and critical towards them. She thinks she's doing them a favor. It's conjunct her midheaven and Jupiter. Jupiter is also in its position of detriment. Jupiter is also her chart ruler, so Jupiter is literally her. This is someone that is concerned with how they look physically and in the eyes of the public. Venus Jupiter on its own, Venus Jupiter connections, especially in hard aspect, which the conjunction is neutral, but because they're both in not so great of condition, can have a lot to do with a personality that is shallow, vain, concerned with concepts like popularity and relevance, especially when it's conjunct the midheaven. Jupiter as Kim's chart ruler in its position of detriment, conjunct the midheaven, and with Venus there as well, gives me the vibe of like social climbing and potentially the orchestration of relationships. Venus and Jupiter, both in not great condition. Okay, so also just a preface. When I got into astrology, I don't want to say zero interest in Hellenistic astrology or traditional astrology. It was just not something that was on my radar because I always just thought that, let me stop sharing my screen. I always just thought it was kind of like, well, we've discovered the other planets, so why don't I just learn, modern astrology? But I am curious, and so it was always, I guess, a goal of mine, or it was kind of on my radar to learn about traditional astrology. And I dabble in it. I'm kind of satisfied with the techniques I'm doing at the moment. Anyways, but I'd never put much stock into traditional techniques until I went professional with this and I realized how much planetary dignity, which has to do with the condition of a planet in its like position of exaltation or fall or whatever, how important that actually is when it comes to predictive analysis. And also, the more I practice, the less I believe in concepts like, sorry, I'm still getting over this cold, by the way, just deal with my snorting. I'm still like the concept of free will doesn't exist to me. I am of the belief that literally everything that happens to us in our life is predetermined, and we really don't have as much say or control as to what happens to us than we think we do. And I think planetary dignity and aspects to planets is what controls the outcome of our life, basically. I'm sure there is some kind of wiggle room in there, but going back to Kim's chart, I'm saying this because when we look at her chart, both of these planets are elevated, they're at the top of their chart, they're very public. One of them is her chart ruler. These are conjunct. Sorry. They are in positions of detriment and fall. This is a disastrous public outcome related to her relationships. We have Kim as Jupiter, her relationships generally as Venus, they're conjunct, public, in detriment and fall, disastrous public relationships. That's kind of like a very quick analysis of those two planets conjunct the midheaven. In my astrological opinion, I never thought I would come to a conclusion like that until I started going pro with astrology and I realized how important planetary dignity actually is. Okay. Anyways, Kim also has Venus square Neptune in her natal chart, and she has Neptune conjunct the ascendant as well. Um, just Venus, I mean, Neptune conjunct the ascendant on its own. This is going to give qualities to an individual that makes them kind of not see themselves and their relationships clearly. The boundaries between them and the partner are blurred. And with Venus squaring Neptune as well, it's kind of saying a similar thing. Venus Neptune in hard aspect, they have very high expectations around love. The relationship has to be perfect, especially with Venus in Virgo. I told you, nitpicky, critical, squaring Neptune. The relationship has to be perfect. It has to look perfect. It has to be, you know, the expectations are so high when it comes to Kim and her approach to relationships. Tends to idealize herself or idealize the partner. I say herself because in a woman's chart, Venus is related to femininity. And there is the potential here with the square to be disillusioned in love. I don't think she has great discernment when it comes to choosing a partner. She does have this Venus sextiling Uranus, which gives me the impression she needs some kind of distance in relationships. Venus Neptune with in hard aspect, it's kind of like the relationship has to be perfect. She might actually maintain some of that through some distance, i.e., not living with the partner, not sharing a bedroom with a partner, keeping some mystery to the relationship. But Venus sextile Uranus is all, because this is a soft aspect. In my opinion, with Venus in Mercury, Venus in the sign ruled by Mercury as well, she needs some kind of mental connection with the partner, a partner that is more like a friend, potentially a business partner. Virgo is the sign related to daily work. Someone she can talk business with or be practical with. And then she has the ruler of her seventh house, which is Mercury, conjunct Uranus as well. Unconventional pairings, the partner is likely to be Uranian of some kind. This can also just give testimony to the sudden beginning and endings of a relationship. This is not like a mutual reception thing, but it's, I guess, planetary reception. I'm getting off track. Venus is in the sign of Virgo. Virgo is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is conjunct Uranus, and this Venus is also sextile Uranus. She has some kind of Uranian edge to her relationships. And I think that comes down to like some kind of being able to just like talk business with the partner and maintain some distance. But then she's also very easily like disillusioned, maybe a little bit naive in love as well. So that's something she's, probably trying to work out in this lifetime. Um, I'm not going to talk too much about the moon because I'll get carried away. But if we look at Chris's chart now and his ability to relate, Kris has Venus in Aries conjunct Mars. Again, planetary dignities. Venus is in its position of detriment, Mars is in its position of domicile. In my opinion, this Mars is dominating this Venus. There's this kind of impulsive romantic quality to him. The masculine principle dominates the feminine principle. This is someone, in my opinion, that is concerned with sex and driven by sexual attraction in relationships. There's a kind of innocence to him as well, in that the simplicity of his approach is actually kind of innocent. These are both sextile Jupiter. I think he's kind of like a social guy, kind of basic but friendly, easy to get along with, and has some kind of active approach to his partnerships. Like likes to go out and do things with the partner. He also has Venus squaring Neptune in his chart. So him and Kim both have this aspect in their natal charts. So similarly to him, he has this idealized version of the feminine. The woman, in my this is in my opinion, based on the signs these planets are in. It's like the woman has to look perfect. With it specifically being in a sign like Aries and its position of detriment, it's like the woman has to like suck, fuck, cook, clean, eats, pizza and pasta and hamburgers and drinks beer, but like still looks like a model, is naive and submissive, but also like still has a job or a career. It's kind of like a frat boy expectancy of what the perfect woman should be like or is going to be like. That's what I think is going on with him specifically with this aspect. But he does have kind of high expectations with love. Also, because his Venus and Mars are conjunct, this Mars is also square this Neptune. And Mars Neptune in hard aspect is kind of like idealizing the masculine principle, idealizing his own masculinity. I think potentially he has some kind of traditional 1950s perspective or view of marriage and how marriage should be. Kind of, i.e., I go out and work and you stay home and, like kind of like playing house, I suppose. Um, and then I don't look at the inconjunct aspect typically, but this is what's just stood out to me when I looked at his chart. He has Venus in conjunct to the moon, and an inconjunction is an aspect of friction. It's kind of like an itch you can't scratch or like two ships passing in the night. They're not even on separate pages. It's like they're in separate books, like separate volumes kind of. The moon in Virgo, Venus in Aries. It's like the moon typically correlates to the wife in a man's chart, whereas Venus is like women in general and what they tend to like and how they are socially. And with these planets in conjunct, it's like the woman has to be, or his view of women in his mind or his psyche, whatever, has to be submissive, but only for me. Has to be sexually experienced, but still a virgin. Bubbly and charming, but not too socially involved. Do you know what I mean? It's something like that. This, along with the squares to Neptune from these planets, it just feels like playing house with him. I don't think he knows what he wants actually when it comes to relationships. And because he is kind of like more easygoing with the sextile to Jupiter between Venus and Mars and Jupiter, that sextile, kind of easygoing. I just don't think he knows what he wants. Or didn't at the time. And then he also has this Uranus conjunct his descendant, sudden, unconventional relationship potential in his chart. That's their abilities to relate. Okay, what were their similarities? They both have a hard Venus Neptune contact in their chart. They both have the square. They're both naive in love. They expect too much from the partner. Disappointed when the partner is or displays signs of being human and not being perfect. The idealization of femininity. They can, in my opinion as well, based on how their charts are kind of correlated. Like if you remember, like Kim had the Venus in Virgo, he had his Venus in Aries. Their approach to relationships are different, even though they have the square. But so what I think potentially could have been an issue in their marriage is like with the Venus Neptune stuff between in both of their natal charts, it's like there could have been some difficulty like consummating the marriage, which I'm assuming they had sex after they got married. It's not like that, but it's kind of like they consummated the marriage, but because they were married now, the way they viewed sex was different and maybe less appealing than it was before they got married. Because the consummation of the marriage with the Venus Neptune thing is like, then the marriage and the image of the wife is kind of corrupted. Do you know what I mean? Especially in Kris's chart when he has that in conjunction between Venus and the moon, that is kind of like the woman has to be kind of, or like the Madonna whore kind of complex. The woman has to be like perfect, but also kind of, not so perfect in other ways, but only for me. And so I think after they got married, his image of Kim was kind of shattered a little bit because of the Venus Neptune stuff and the need for the partner to be perfect and living together or whatever. Suddenly they weren't perfect for each other anymore. And then they also have that Uranus signature. Kim had the ruler of her seventh house conjunct Uranus. Kris had Uranus conjunct his descendant. It's not the exact same thing, but there is the potential in both of their natal charts for there to be sudden, unexpected love potential. The partnership is unconventional in some way. Additionally, yeah, I'll share the screen. All right. Kris has Neptune in his seventh house, and Kim has Neptune in her first house. This is something I like to see because it gives a sense of cohesion to the relationship. What Kris expects the partner to have, Kim actually has. Again, it was like, I think she was kind of his dream woman or his feminine ideal, at least temporarily, at least until they got married. And then I think it became too real for them. Additionally, Kim has Sagittarius rising and Gemini on the descendant, and Kris is a Gemini rising with Sagittarius on the descendant, obviously. Again, that's just kind of more cohesion. Based on the natal temperaments alone, I can actually see why they got into a relationship with each other. Okay? If we look at the synastry between them, I think it was uh this one. All right. This is their bi-wheel. Kim's natal chart is in the middle. Kris's natal chart is on the outside. Okay. Kim's Venus falls in Kris's fourth house. You can't see it here, but this is Kris's fourth house up here. And his Venus falls in Kim's fourth house. This is planetary overlay. This is kind of just where that planets act out their energy in the other person's chart. I don't put too much stock into chart overlay as much as I do the actual like mathematical aspects between planets. But I thought this was interesting. Both each other's Venus falls in the other both Venuses fall both Kim's Venus falls in his fourth house, his Venus falls in her fourth house. This is again some kind of like correlation to that Venus Neptune thing of playing house, wife material, husband material. There's some kind of dynamic like that going on between them. Kim's Mars is sextile Kris's Venus. I like to see Mars Venus aspects in synastry for romantic relationships. They were sexually attracted to each other. The sex was probably pretty good. Again, I can see why they ended up in a relationship with each other. They don't have a sun moon contact, which I don't love, but again, there's other relationship stuff going on, but the fact they don't have a sun moon contact potentially could give testimony to the fact as to why this relationship didn't last longer than a year. Because, like something like a Venus Mars contact, that's just attraction. It has nothing to do with longevity. Kim's Mars is square Kris's moon. He has his moon in Virgo, she has her Mars in Sagittarius. This gives me the impression that Kris potentially felt like Kim kind of barged into his emotional arena, kind of barged in and emotionally violated him in some way, invaded his privacy, something like that. Kim's Saturn is opposite Kris's Venus and Mars because he has this conjunction in Aries. Kim's Saturn is opposite this, and because this is a hard aspect, we're going to be talking about the hard stuff that comes along with it. Saturn is pressure. Saturn in Libra, which is what Kim has, is like relationship pressure. Again, it can be more testimony as to Kim's need for relationships to seem perfect with that Venus in Virgo. The Saturn in Libra is like a karmic relationship thing. The relationship has to be perfect. Kris potentially felt like Kim was kind of domineering, pressuring him to commit, especially when you consider it's across the Libra Aries axis, which is the axis of relationships. It's very binding, but kind of irksome as well, especially when you consider Kris's natal temperament. This is why it's important to look at the natal temperament. He has a Venus Mars conjunction in Aries. He's kind of impulsive and he's kind of simple. With the sextile to Jupiter as well, there is this kind of freedom urge with him. I don't think he's someone that was like, again, he was 26 when he got married and he was a basketball player. I don't get the impression he was someone that was like, like it would dream about his wedding. Yes, he did have the square to Neptune from his Venus, that could have been, again, he thought Kim was his feminine ideal. So maybe there was that part of him that was like that, but generally I think he was kind of like just happy-go-lucky and was just kind of dating and stuff. Along comes Kim, she looks perfect to him. Her Saturn is opposite his Venus and Mars. He felt like there was some kind of pressure from her to maybe propose or to get married. Again, Kim is 5 years older than him as well. There was some kind of power imbalance, status imbalance. I think this played a massive part. But Venus Saturn aspects in Synastry, even the hard aspects, they're good generally for commitment. It makes the other person want to commit, but you'd prefer the soft aspects, but the hard aspects I will take over none. Kim's moon is trine his Saturn. So I think Kim felt very emotionally contained around him. His Saturn's over here. Whoop. I think she felt like emotionally safe around him. She's got this moon in Pisces natally. I think she's more sensitive than I think anyone really knows or anyone in the public really knows. Her moon is also square Neptune, so she is kind of naive. I think she's more like an emotional psychic sponge. I think she felt very safe around Kris. His Saturn is conjunct her Mercury, though, so let me redraw this. Her moon is trine his Saturn. She felt safe around him. His Saturn is conjunct her Mercury, which is her mind and how she expresses herself and processes information. It's also conjunct her Uranus, but I think that's less important right now. Um, so yeah, he did kind of represent some kind of partnership to her because that Mercury Uranus conjunction is a like partnership trigger point in her chart. But I think specifically from his Saturn to her Mercury, I don't think she felt like she could connect with him emotionally because we are talking about the sign of Scorpio. This is all occurring in Scorpio. I don't think she could emotionally connect with him. I don't think they had very meaningful conversations. And if you remember her natal chart with Venus in Virgo and Mercury um, ruling her seventh house and Venus sextiling her natal Uranus, I said, like, I think she's someone that needs some kind of mental connection with the partner. I don't think she got that with Kris, actually. And that potentially could have been a problem. Kim's Mercury is square his sun. Um, Here. And this is not a deal breaker aspect by any means, but it is kind of like irritating. I think his presence kind of irritated her. And because they're both avoidant with that Venus Neptune thing, I don't think they ever like discussed this or even outright argued about it because Venus Neptune is typically avoidant. Not a deal breaker, but I feel like he kind of gave her the ick in a lot of ways. They have a soft Saturn Jupiter double whammy. So Jupiter is sextile his Saturn, and his Jupiter was trine her Saturn. Not, not something you'd look for in romantic compatibility, but it is constructive. Good friendship ties, specifically good for business. They're allowing each other to grow in some way. Again, not it's this is not a romantic aspect, but there is some kind of like room for growth there. Kris's Uranus is square Kim's Venus. His Uranus is also conjunct her ascendant. So that's kind of like a similar storyline. His Uranus conjunct her ascendant and square her natal Venus. Hard Uranus Venus aspects are kind of like instant love or love at first sight. It's very socially exciting as well. Potentially indicative of a temporary relationship. And I say potentially because I already know, we've already covered, they have some like constructive Saturn things. They have a hard Venus Saturn aspect in their synastry. That can kind of negate can kind of negate any temporary love aspects between them. I think there was actually some kind of longevity potential in their relationship. Um, but generally speaking, if there are no or very little or meaningless kind of hard Saturn aspects in the synastry, but there's like a hard Uranus Venus aspect, it's more likely to be temporary, but they actually had testimony that kind of gives longevity to their relationship, in my opinion. Um, but maybe it was the Uranus conjunct the ascendant that kind of did it. So I would say that the Venus Uranus thing is like they were very attracted to each other kind of instantly. It was very socially exciting for both of them, but his Uranus conjunct her ascendant, which would be opposite her descendant, that could have kind of negated any kind of long-term potential they had between their synastry. That's kind of abstract, but like whatever. Kim's moon square Chris's ascendant. If you remember, he has like a 28-degree Gemini ascendant. Here it is. And her moon is square this. I just feel like Kim was maybe a little bit overlooked by him, or felt overlooked by him, or felt like she was an afterthought to him. And then also, Kim's Jupiter is exactly square his ascendant. I think this was a 0-degree orb. Her Jupiter in Virgo at 28 degrees, 52 minutes. Yeah, his ascendant at 28 degrees, 52 minutes of Gemini. If you remember, as Kim is a Sagittarius rising, Jupiter is her chart ruler. Her chart ruler squaring his ascendant. This is again, it's another testimony to longevity, but because it is a square, that yeah, there's probably some kind of what's the word? It's like a bit more fragile than if it was a soft aspect. But her chart ruler falls in his fourth house. I know it's not, you can't see it here, but this is like his fourth house area. It falls into his fourth. It's a square, it's Jupiter, it's her chart ruler. I get the impression there was some kind of like Kris felt like he may have felt, Kris potentially felt as though Kim was guilting him into this relationship and marriage, specifically with it in Virgo. And it's conjunct her midheaven and her Venus natally. And I said at the start of the video, I think there's something going on with her regarding a need for kind of popularity and relevance. I strongly get the impression Kris felt like Kim was propositioning him with this marriage because again, she's older than him. She has more status than him, more money than him, more fame than etc. Her Saturn is opposite his Venus as well. And I said I think he felt pressured by Kim in some way. And then her Jupiter squaring his ascendant, and this is exactly 0 degree, 0 minute orb, with it being in Virgo. It felt like he felt like she was propositioning him with the marriage, potentially. Kim's midheaven squares his ascendant. Where's her midheaven? Midheaven's here, squares his ascendant. They were just the wrong fit for each other. They also have a nodal reversal. I don't care that much about the nodes in Synastry. I know it's just, but I did notice this. Kim's node is in Leo. North node is in Leo. His north node would be is in Taurus. So their nodes are basically square. So her south node doesn't show up, but it looked like this. So it's basically like a fixed grand cross in their synastry. And then Kris's south node, so his north node is in Taurus, his south node will be in Scorpio, which would be conjunct Kim's Mercury, which is her seventh house ruler. I get the impression, and I'm not an evolutionary astrologer, I don't know much about past lives, I don't know if I necessarily believe in past lives, I don't know. But based on the literature that I've read and my education, I get the impression there was some kind of connection in a past life that was abruptly cut off because this would also be conjunct. His south node would also be conjunct Kim's Uranus, which is sudden endings, abruptly cut off. And I think in this lifetime specifically, they were rushing to make it official because it was cut off last time. Marriage in the past was abruptly called off. Potentially someone ran away, potentially one of them died in a war, I don't know. I think they were destined to be married or had some kind of romantic connection in a past life, and they rushed into marriage in this life because it was abruptly cut off in the last life. Based on the nodes, I think potentially that is what is happening. If we look at their composite chart, composite charts, they can get kind of messy. But if the composite chart on its own, disregarding their chart overlay with the composite chart, the sun is in Sagittarius, conjunct the midheaven. It's also conjunct Mercury and Neptune. This is kind of like a very publicly idealized, broadcasted with Sagittarius, broadcasted relationship. What is a composite chart? I should probably mention that. The composite chart is there's two different ways to do a composite chart. The one I do is a midpoint chart. And this is different than a Davidson. You might hear like composite Davidson chart. A Davidson chart exists in the real world. It takes the midpoints of like the birth data and the location of birth and finds it on the map. And it's like it actually exists. It's a chart that exists and can happen mathematically. A composite chart is very kind of, it's a hypothetical. It's like it takes the midpoints of their charts and creates a composite chart. But this chart literally can't exist because of the math. You know, like Venus, I think, can only be 45 degrees away from the sun. But as you can see, it's opposite the sun. It's 180 degrees away from the sun. That can't happen in astrology. That's impossible. But because this composite chart is just an abstract concept, it can exist. I like the midpoint chart. I don't do Davidson charts. I like the composite midpoint chart. That's what a composite chart is. And basically, it's just like it represents the relationship. And you can track transits and progressions to, you can track transits to the composite chart. You can progress the composite chart, and that might reflect changes happening in the relationship. But it's basically just kind of like an imprinting of the relationship between two people. So when we look at this and it's conjunct the midheaven and it's all in Sagittarius, it's a public relationship. This point is conjunct Kim's ascendant and Kris's Uranus. And I'm not doing a chart overlay for this, but as you remember, Kim was a Sag rising. All of this falls on her ascendant, basically. So it makes sense that Kim made this public, you know? And with this being conjunct Kris's descendant, because he had that Gemini rising with Sag on the descendant, this ties into his chart being like this was an actual relationship that existed for him. This Mercury is exactly conjunct, not exactly, but it's like within a degree conjunct his descendant. With it being Mercury, and it's like Mercury is his chart ruler. This composite Mercury conjunct his descendant. I get the impression from the composite chart he may have felt like a bystander in his own marriage, just because, you know, Mercury is his chart ruler, and yet it's in the seventh house in the composite. Or Mercury is his chart ruler, yet the composite Mercury is conjunct his seventh house. I feel like he may have felt like a bystander in his own marriage based on that placement alone. The moon is conjunct Venus in Gemini in the fourth house. I think this was kind of like a lovely, sweet, and kind of innocent relationship, but with the full, basically the full moon going on, and it's across the Gemini Sag axis. I think they were doing a lot of like learning with Gemini, learning about themselves and what they need in relationships and what they want and they like in relationships. And with all of this happening like very publicly, I feel like it was like a public disaster, but there was actually some kind of learning experience in this for them, but very privately. This is, wait, what was it? Oh, these two are conjunct Kim's descendant, but from the 12th house. Kim put in effort for it to be like this. And so Kim put in a lot of effort for this relationship, for it to be this kind of like sweet, loving relationship that they had. I think Kim put effort in for it. And because this, no, okay, sorry, this is conjunct Kim's descendant. End of story. This is also conjunct Kris's ascendant from the 12th house. That's what I meant to say. Kim put effort in for it to be like this, with it being in her like seventh house. And again, it's kind of like this weird idealized thing for her. Kris, I think, feels guilty about something to do with this relationship, considering this falls in his natal 12th house. There's a T square between all of these and the composite ascendant. So these were opposite. There's a T square to the ascendant as well. I feel like the public influence with all of this stuff, public influence and gossip and scrutiny kind of corrupted all of this like lovely stuff that was happening privately for them. And I really strongly get the impression that it was really good when it was private, and then as soon as it kind of went public and got out of control, you know, I always think of like Sag as just like this kind of horse that's running wild. Once, there's like a saying for it. I can't remember, like, you know, when like horses start like running and there's like the commentary announcers and they have that kind of like a voice and they're like commentating on what the horses are doing. That is what it feels like with this marriage. It was like kind of nice, and then the race kind of started and it just got out of control. Um, as soon as it kind of went public, as soon as the marriage was official, I get the feeling it wasn't perfect anymore. And there are people that need that kind of, love needs to be perfect. That's what they have going on in their mind. Like love needs to be perfect. It needs to be this way. So I feel like there was maybe, I think the public aspect to the relationship, the public wedding, the rushing, Sagittarius, the rushing, that ruined it. That ruined the relationship. I think they did have the potential for this to be a very long, meaningful relationship between them. And I think it being public is what actually ruined it. Um, this Pisces ascendant is also conjunct Kim's moon. This relationship kind of felt like her baby. It felt like she was safe here. She kind of got lost in this relationship. And interestingly, this composite, for example, the first and seventh house rulers are both at 29 degrees. Jupiter, or is it Jupiter at 29 degrees of Scorpio, and Mercury rules Virgo. Mercury is at 29 degrees of Sagittarius. 29 degrees, about to change elements and modalities. It's about to burn out. It's temporary, I know. It's kind of sad. But I just thought that was like an interesting observation. It's like this was not. There was longevity potential there, but also there kind of wasn't. It's so fragile. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so that was their natal charts, synastry, and composite. And now we should look at Kim's progressed chart on its own, I think. All right. Kim's progressed sun is at 29 degrees of Scorpio. And some astrologers might, or some astrologers do, look at, overlays between like the composite chart and the natal chart and the composite chart and each person's progressed chart. I don't, but I already know because we just looked at it. The composite Jupiter was at 29 degrees Scorpio. Kim's sun was at 29 degrees, progressed sun was at 29 degrees Scorpio. Again, that's more testimony to the fact that this was, in my opinion, a real relationship. But just based on Kim's progressed chart alone, the sun at 29 degrees of Scorpio, her Mars at 29 degrees of Sag. This is too volatile for me. This does not look like the progressed chart of someone that's about to get married or someone that is about to enter a long-term marriage. Also, she's almost at a full moon, but not yet. Almost at a full um progressed moon, progressed lunar cycle, but not yet. If the moon was full, I was going to say if it was full, maybe that's more testimony to the fact that this could be like a long-term marriage, but I think it would be equally as um it would have failed more spectacularly, maybe. And I think she married Kanye in 2013, so 2 years later. That would have been after. I think this full moon would have peaked, which that feels more steady. And it also, no, it wouldn't have been because the sun would have progressed in. Anyways, the point is there's something about this being like a full moon, but not fully, that is kind of like not yet. It's like a false start. This progressed almost full moon gives me the sense of like a false start, and the fact that these two planets are at 29 degrees, they're about to change sides. It's kind of like, Um, also, if we look at her progressed chart to her natal chart, which I do look at, so that was just her progressed chart on its own. If we look at the connections between her progressed chart and her um natal chart, her progressed sun is trine her moon and sextile Jupiter. Her progressed sun, again, that 29 degrees Scorpio, trining her natal moon and sextile her natal Jupiter, which is also a chart ruler. I think she was ready for a relationship. She was ready for love and she was feeling safe around this time. I don't know why, I get a sense of like a maturity factor. Feeling stable, feeling safe in her life. There's some kind of maturation process. I think she felt that she was ready to settle down, almost. Her progressed Venus was conjunct her natal sun. Her progressed Venus was at 26 degrees of Libra, conjunct her natal sun. This is someone that is relationship orientated, especially with it falling in the sign of Libra. Her progressed Mars was at 29 degrees of Sag, which was squaring her moon, her natal moon. Rushing, that Sag energy, Mars and Sag, the horses, like running out of the gate at the horse race. This wild kind of energy squaring the moon. It's like a rushing to settle down. Exaggerated behavior as well. Carelessness, yeah. And I get specifically like carelessness and broken promises and just rushing out the gate. That's the kind of energy I get with the square between the Mars and the moon, specifically in these signs. And then her progressed moon was opposite her natal Mercury. Mercury rules her seventh house. The progressed moon was opposite the ruler of her seventh house. The progressed moon, in case you didn't know, is an excellent timer for marriage. If you go back and study, you can study a million marriage charts. The progressed moon will almost always be aspecting something like Venus or the ruler of the seventh house in someone's chart. It is the most astounding, perfect timer for events. It's amazing. Anyway, so the fact that her progressed moon was opposite her natal Mercury and Mercury rules her seventh house, as an astrologer, you could time, like you could go back and look at her transits and stuff like that, and you could kind of see like I think she's going to get married faster than we all kind of think because they got engaged in May. And you'd think, oh, they'd get married in a year, they'd get married in a year and a half, whatever. An astrologer could see this and be like, no, it's happening way sooner. But um, I digress. Okay, I think that was everything about her predictive cycles. And then if we look at the transits now, I think these were the transits. No, this one? Yes. Okay. I want to talk about the eclipses first because nothing major like a marriage will happen in someone's life unless eclipses are activating the ascendant descendant axis or the rulers of the ascendant and descendant. And this is how you can kind of tell if a marriage is occurring because you will definitely see eclipses to these points. She had an eclipse conjunct her descendant on the 1st of June 2011. That opens the doorway for 6 months for a marriage to occur. She also had an eclipse conjunct her ascendant 2 weeks later on the 15th of June. More testimony. She had an eclipse conjunct her Mars on the 25th of November. This is after the marriage occurred, where they got married in August. This is after she filed for divorce as well, but again, there's a 6 month window before and after the eclipse. She has Mars in her 12th house natally. I think this eclipse kind of opened the doorway for her to feel a bit spooked by the relationship and by the marriage. There was also another eclipse conjunct her descendant on the 10th of December. So from June to December, she had 4 eclipses, 3 of them on her ascendant descendant axis, one of them on her Mars in her 12th house. If we look at the transits, planetary transits that were active for her around this time, these are occurring from where did I write it? From October 2010 to December 2011. So they met or started dating in October 2010. Kim filed for divorce in October 2011, and I did extend the time search a bit beyond that as well. Okay, she had a solar arc of moon or sun equals moon. Domestic themes were occurring for her. I get the feeling she wanted to settle down. She did have her progressed sun trining her moon, a solar arc of moon equaling the sun. It's like settling down, feeling like she has to settle down because she may have felt a bit aimless around this time. Because again, she was like 31 years old-ish. And based on other transits as well, I get the feeling that this was more like not a compulsion for her, but it was more societally driven, I feel like. She had a solar arc of the midheaven equaling the sun, which this is obviously some kind of indication of need for recognition, prominence, potentially some desire for fame. through relating, because this was occurring in Libra, her progressed midheaven was conjunct her Libra sun. Her progressed midheaven, her progressed midheaven, yeah, was conjunct her Libra sun, which would be a progression and a solar arc. Um, Transiting Uranus was conjunct her moon around this time as well. I mean, you can see it here, but it changed signs at some point. I am doing this in like chronological order as well. It's such a messy video. Whatever. I'm doing it in chronological order. Her Uranus was conjunct her moon, and it would have conjuncted her fourth house cusp around this time as well, triggering this opposition between her moon and Jupiter that she has natally. There was, in my opinion, some kind of like domestic upheaval. I wasn't there. I don't know if she was having issues with like her actual residence, for example. The moon is also a feeling of safety. The fourth has to do with your foundations in life and feeling safe physically as well as emotionally, whatever. Uranus changes the frequency of whatever it touches, especially in a conjunction. I think she has an opposition between the moon and Jupiter natally. And with this conjunction from Uranus triggering that opposition, I can't help but wonder if Kim actually kind of like struggles with something like, and I'm not a doctor, I don't think it's like manic depression. I don't think it's that extreme. But if it's something like she goes through periods where she just doesn't act like herself or just makes really stupid choices. Moon Jupiter has a habit of doing that, just making really stupid choices, especially, and again, planetary dignity, Jupiter's in its position of detriment. So it's like against her own best interest. She just does stupid shit. And I think this was happening when she was in one of these moments of her life where she was kind of like, I'll just use manic depression as like an umbrella term. Her feeling kind of like manic around this time. Uranus is like a sudden upheaval, the rug being pulled out from under you, emotional instability cranked up to 10, sudden change to status because this Uranus was opposite her midheaven as well. And all of this was happening very quickly. And that's reflected in the relationship because they were married before they even knew each other for a year. Like this was all happening very quickly. But we're not talking about her relationship now. We're talking about how she's represented in the world, where she fits in, what's going on at home. So that's kind of interesting to me. She also had transiting Jupiter conjunct her moon. Jupiter conjunct moon. Yeah. So she would have had transiting Jupiter also here, which Jupiter blows things up. This would have, she already has the opposition natally between her moon and Jupiter, and then transiting Jupiter comes along and opposes her natal Jupiter as well. So again, manic depression, more or less, something like that. Manic behavior cranked up to probably like the knob fell off, basically. Moon in Pisces, conjunct Jupiter in Pisces, and Uranus is there as well. I get the impression of some kind, again, it's like some form of like emotional regression. Emotional regression in times of stress, surrendering to habitual patterns. I think Kim has potentially really bad coping mechanisms, worse than anyone would expect. Surrendering to these like habitual patterns and poor behavior, poor reasoning, etc. Feeling swept away by these feelings. They're that intense as well, like just surrendering to them, feeling swept away, feeling kind of powerless against them, and avoiding responsibility and accountability, regressing back to that baby state, that womb state of wanting to be taken care of. This was happening with her around the time she met and got engaged to Kris Humphries. She was also experiencing transiting Pluto, which would have been in her first house, squaring her Saturn. Not a huge deal, but again, I don't know what was actually happening with her, specifically regarding her house. Like, there literally could have been issues with her house, the place that she lived. I lean towards financial issues just because Saturn rules her second house and it's in her 10th house, which is a vocation. financial issues potentially, in my opinion, that's what I'm leaning towards. Pluto Saturn in heart aspect is a feeling of like loss of control and like the structures of your life are crumbling around you. With the domestic stuff, potentially, again, I don't know. I get the feeling issues with the house specifically and like emotional instability in general. I wonder if she was advised or knew that maybe something to do with her finances was not so great. Maybe her house payments, for example, were getting a bit excessive, out of control. Her spending was getting out of control. Um, and she was advised, like, you can't keep living like this because you're not going to be able to afford it. Based on the way things are going, you are not going to be able to keep up with your bills in 5 years' time, 10, whatever. Because the wedding was so publicized and it was so expensive as well, and it all happened very quickly, I can't help, and she was emotionally unstable around this time. I can't help but wonder if this was actually rushed along, pushed along, if Kris was pressured into marrying her quickly than he maybe would have otherwise, because she needed money that desperately and because she wasn't thinking very clearly as well around. I think this is potentially what was happening based on that Pluto square. Saturn, again, I don't know the what was going on privately around this time. I only know about the marriage, but that is where I'm kind of going with this. She also experienced Jupiter opposite Saturn, so that transiting Jupiter would have ingressed into her fourth house and opposed her natal Saturn. This is across the Aries Libra axis, so more relationship themes. The opposition is an aspect of relating as well. I get the feeling she was maybe trying to find stability, value, and meaning in her relationships. This is just like a very strong relationship aspect and transit for me, especially when you consider Jupiter as a chart ruler as well. It's an opposition. That's a relationship aspect. It's occurring across Libra and Aries. Those are the relationship signs, and across the fourth and 10th axis. It's almost, yeah, it's like relate like a public kind of relationship. Also, when you consider she was at that age where she was probably considering, oh, like I'm 30 years old, I'm not married, I don't have any kids, I need to be thinking about these things, and maybe I can even monetize it as well, because money wasn't looking so great, potentially. Jupiter ingressed into a fifth house at some point. Again, I don't have the exact dates. Jupiter ingressed into a fifth house and opposed her sun. And this is just like the marriage and the wedding is probably all she was thinking about around this time. Fifth house is a house of romance. It's still across the Aries Libra axis. I feel like she was just excited about getting married, and this was all she was thinking about. Again, she had that some kind of like, mental instability going on. Manic episode. She was excited to be married, whatever. She was also experiencing a solar arc of Mercury equals Neptune. And this is where, alarm bells are kind of going off for all the little astrologers out there. An aspect like this or an arc like this is like not paying attention, ignoring red flags, having the blinders on. The partner is not seen accurately. She has the square between Venus and Neptune natally. She has Neptune conjunct her ascendant. She is not good at choosing a partner. She has Venus in fall and it's conjunct Jupiter in detriment. She cannot pick a good partner to save her life. I promise you. And I hate to say it like that. It's just the natal promise that she has. I don't believe in free will. She has some kind of soul contract in this lifetime to consistently choose bad partners. And the fact that she was getting married during an arc between Mercury and Neptune, which is, again, it's like the blinders are on, you're not seeing things clearly. This relationship was going to be a disaster, a very public one, with Jupiter and Venus conjunct her natal midheaven. Okay. 10 days after the wedding, transiting Jupiter, stationed retrograde, opposite Kim's Mercury. These are our two marriage signifiers. This is where shit gets real. Apart from that, the Neptune Mercury arc. So Jupiter was here and then ingress into her sixth house, which has to do with like the details of everyday life. And then it's, here, stationed retrograde. Wait. Transiting Jupiter in the sixth house, stationed retrograde. Jupiter is her chart ruler. It's also conjunct her midheaven, so this is all very public. Stationed retrograde, opposite Mercury. Mercury rules her seventh house. She's also experiencing an arc of Mercury E equals Neptune. Not seeing things clearly. Her chart ruler in her sixth house, stations retrograde, planets, transiting planets stationing retrograde is a trigger, by the way. Stationing retrograde opposite the ruler of her seventh house. I think she realized, I'm not even joking, within a week that this marriage was a mistake. It makes sense because, again, she filed for divorce 3 months after they got married. I don't know when they separated. I didn't look that up. Almost instantly. I'm literally saying within a week, she realized this marriage was a mistake. Potentially, if she does have like some kind of manic issue, this is when she would have been coming out of that. I think she realized with it involving, her sixth house as well, she was real like this is not going to work. He's not compatible with me and my day-to-day life and whatever. Also, 2 days before she filed for divorce, she had Pluto conjunct her Saturn. No, I think it was transiting Saturn conjunct her natal Pluto. It was something like that. No, wait. I have Pluto conjunct Saturn 2 days before she filed for divorce. Maybe I can't remember if this was an arc or a transit. I can't remember. Maybe it was an arc, but she had the square happening from the transiting Pluto to her Saturn, and then she had some other Pluto Saturn thing going on. I should have notated that better. This tells me that like the same problem still existed. She still had the same, in my opinion, it was some kind of like financial thing. It was something about her wanting to try and rebrand herself, making herself more relevant to keep, money coming in because I think there was some financial issues to keep money coming in. These issues still existed. This whole event didn't erase that. It didn't improve those issues. But then she also had transiting Uranus opposing her Saturn. This to me just says there are new issues as well. So she still has the Pluto Saturn stuff going on, old issues, potentially a reason why she rushed into this marriage. And then also with Uranus, Uranus rules new things. Uranus opposite an aspect of relationships, her natal Saturn in Libra. There are just new issues as well. Unexpected, potentially financial, because Saturn does rule her second house and it's in her 10th house of, professional standing. Unexpected financial and professional fallout. And she's, primed for this in her natal chart because Venus does rule money as well, very broadly for everyone. And with, again, back to planetary dignity, being in detriment, conjunct her midheaven, conjunct Jupiter, public fallout, unexpected financial, professional fallout, new problems, old Pluto Saturn issues still happening, and now the Uranus Saturn issues is like renovations and adjustments and noise, basically. Her progressed moon ingress into her sixth house. This is, I think, after she filed for divorce. This is just cleanup mode, basically. And I think that's all I had to say about. Oh no, I wanted to look at their Kim's return chart as well, solar return. Okay. The solar return chart is just a snapshot of when the sun returned to its natal position. Astrologers will also, some people and like followers of astrology and astrologers will be like, you can travel during your solar return, which will give you, it would allow the planets to fall in different houses. So you can try to avoid or outrun your astrology. Again, I'm I don't think we have free will, and I don't think you can outrun your astrology because everything comes back to the natal chart. I always cast a solar return chart for the birth position. Like when you're talking about the sun, especially, the solar return chart is like centered around the sun. You can't outrun yourself. You are you, wherever you are in the world. Your astrology is happening to you, regardless of where you want to go to allow these planets to fall in different houses. You can't outrun your astrology. You can't outrun your karma. I cast it for the birth position. I'm never doing a relocated Saturn return chart. I mean, sun return chart. Solar return chart. Also, I don't know where Kim Kardashian was on the day that the transiting sun returned to her natal birth position. I don't know where she was. So I'm doing it for the birth position always. And the solar return chart is just a snapshot of the sky when the sun returned to its natal position. And it's kind of like looking through a window of the upcoming year and the themes you can expect. I will not make a prediction based on the solar return chart alone. I always look at the solar return chart last and I use it to corroborate and kind of narrow down the main themes of the year. I can already tell based on her transits and eclipses specifically, and the progressed moon opposite her seventh house ruler, she was going to get married or was going to get close to getting married. Okay. She has a solar return sun in the solar return seventh house. That's a year of relating. Let me get my notes for this actually. This was a year of relationships for her. This solar return Mars, so this is all transits. This is not directly plugged into her natal chart, but it's based on her natal sun position and where she was, most likely at the time. And I would cast it for the birth location anyways, which would be Los Angeles. Solar return Mars was square Neptune. This is an aspect of not seeing men clearly, choosing a man based on very potentially surface level criteria, idealizing the man, seeing him as like a hero figure or like a knight in shining armor. Saturn was also square Pluto in this chart. Saturn in Libra, relationship themes. Pluto conjunct the midheaven, having like controlling how the public sees her could have played into this. Saturn in the seventh house as well. Karmic relationships were a theme here. The sun in the seventh house, more relationship themes. She's got transiting Pluto squaring the solar return ascendant. Again, trying to publicly control how her relationship is perceived, how she is perceived. That's a theme here. Control because Pluto is control. Midheaven, public recognition, social standing in the sign of Capricorn. It's like trying to look respectable. The Capricorn Cancer axis can also have a lot to say with like the public life and professional structures of the individual versus the private life. It has a lot to do with like status change as well. You'll see a lot of transits to the midheaven when a woman does get married, typically because their status is changing. She's going from a single woman, more or less, to a married woman. That comes with a lot of status. People see you differently, etc. Pluto squaring the ascendant and conjunct the midheaven. It's like this is like it's very controlling. It's very orchestrated, but not very publicly orchestrated, if that makes sense. It's more psychological. What did it for me is like, if I wasn't 13 years old at the time, and I was a professional astrologer, and I was looking at Kim's cycles back then, or if she was coming to me as a client, I see the ruler of the solar return seventh house in the seventh house, compounding that this is a year of relating for her, in its sign of fall or detriment, and it's retrograde. This marriage or relationship it was dead on arrival, I think. So that's all I had to say about all of this. Okay, I can stop this. So what I think happened between them was that they actually were in love. They're kind of naive. They were naive about the relationship. They really did like each other. They had some kind of romantic connection. I think Kris felt like he was pressured into this relationship by Kim. Maybe Kim, in her mind, in this mental state she was in, she confided in him that maybe her professional life wasn't looking too good, her finances weren't looking too good. She was at that age that she wants to settle down, she wants to have kids. They're both very idealistic about this relationship. Kris thinks Kim's perfect, she thinks he's good enough. And, they rushed into this marriage, rushed into this relationship when hypothetically, if they took their time with it a bit more, I think it did have the potential to work out. I don't think this marriage was actually, I don't think the relationship was orchestrated to gain attention or generate income. The relationship itself, I think, was actually real. and they were very idealistic. And I think Kim was under a lot of pressure to progress this relationship and get things happening and monetize on it because I do think there was some financial issues going on. And that is what kind of ruined it. I hypothetically, if Kris was a little bit older, maybe because their cycles would have been different. And granted, I didn't look at Chris's cycles during this time, so I don't actually know what was going on with him. Just Kim. I think that if he was a bit more mature, she wouldn't have been so icked out by him in the sense that like it was a transiting Jupiter stationing retrograde opposite the Mercury, and the fact that she was going through the arc of Neptune equals or Mercury equals Neptune. It was just like I don't think he fit into her life at that time, and she realized very soon after the wedding that she couldn't live like this for much longer. She couldn't live like this for the rest of her life. It was the marriage specifically, not the relationship. The marriage was dead on arrival, and it was the rushing to get married and the publicizing of the relationship in such a grotesque, gargantuan way that ruined the relationship because we go back to the I get the impression very strongly Kris felt like a bystander in the relationship and in the marriage, and it felt like he was kind of pushed to the side and didn't even matter because it wasn't really about him, it was about Kim. Granted, again, I only looked at Kim's cycles. It felt like it was Kim's wedding, not Kim's marriage to him, Kim's wedding, something like that. So again, all of this was alleged. Astrology isn't even real. Whatever. I think they were actually kind of a cute couple and it could have worked out, but it was Kim's poor uh, professional choices that kind of, ruined any success potential that was in this relationship. And going back to the planetary dignity stuff, people want to say like Kim is such a good businesswoman. I don't see it. I think she's a really bad businesswoman, actually. I think she's really great at, and I'm talking specifically about the Jupiter in a full position conjunct the midheaven with Venus there in full conjunct the midheaven. I don't think she's a great businesswoman. I think she's really good at having a lot of different things going on. And I think that's what she does these days. I think she mostly does like, I know she has Skims, which is like that underwear line. And like maybe, is Kim Kardashian beauty still a thing? I don't know. She's good at having a lot of different things going on, but I don't think she's actually good at like calling the shots and making, yeah, good professional decisions and stuff like that. So I think this was just like a flop for her. It really tainted her reputation for a long time. And I don't know what specifically would have been happening with her when she married or got engaged to Kanye. Because I think they got married like 2 years later. And that's, you know, somebody getting married 2 years after they just got married and divorced. Like, I wonder what was going on. I don't think I'll ever look though. But yeah, I think she was ready to get married, ready to settle down and try to monetize on it. And that kind of just flopped and, you know, crashed and burned and whatever. So that was my video on the cycles that were active when Kim Kardashian married Kris Humphries and the synastry and the romantic potential in their natal charts. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.